What if the breakfast you've been eating almost every morning of your life is quietly shaping your memory in ways you've never been told about? Not because breakfast is inherently dangerous, but because of a handful of small, repeated mistakes that most people never realize they're making. And what if correcting those mistakes starting tomorrow morning could become one of the simplest but most powerful steps you take for your brain after 60? It may sound like an overstatement at first, but as we go deeper into what's actually happening inside the aging brain, you'll see why this conversation matters far more than most people think. There is also something later in this discussion that surprises many people the first time they hear it. A simple way of rebuilding breakfast so it actively supports memory, focus, and mental clarity instead of slowly working against it. Stay with this, because what you're about to learn can genuinely change how your brain feels on a daily basis. Not in theory, but in practical life. I'm a physician who has spent years working in nutrition, aging, and brain health, and a large part of my work involves speaking with people over 60 who are confused and worried about changes in their thinking. They describe the same experiences in different words: forgetting familiar names, walking into a room and losing track of why they went there, struggling to hold on to conversations that used to feel effortless, or noticing a kind of mental fog that wasn't there years earlier. These are not rare complaints, and they are not simply normal aging in the way people often assume. When we carefully look at daily routines, one pattern appears again and again. It isn't something dramatic or hidden. It is something ordinary, repeated every morning: breakfast. Not because breakfast alone determines brain health, but because it sets the biological tone for the entire day. Blood sugar regulation, inflammation levels, neurotransmitter activity, and mental energy are all influenced by what you consume first. And among common breakfast foods, eggs stand out in a very interesting way. When prepared and combined correctly, they can strongly support brain function. But when they are prepared incorrectly, or paired with the wrong foods, they can quietly contribute to the very issues people are trying to avoid. To understand why this matters, it helps to understand what is happening inside the brain as we age. Imagine the brain as an enormous city, built from billions of connected pathways. Those pathways are neurons, constantly sending messages back and forth. Every memory you have, every word you recall, every moment of recognition when you see a familiar face, depends on those signals traveling smoothly. Over time, however, several forces begin to interfere with that communication system. One of the most important is inflammation inside the brain. Unlike the sharp pain of a physical injury, this kind of inflammation is silent and gradual. It slowly disrupts how neurons communicate, making the system less efficient. Alongside that is oxidative stress, which can be understood as a kind of internal wear and tear. As brain cells produce energy, they create byproducts that, if not balanced by antioxidants, begin to damage cellular structures over time. Another critical factor is blood flow. Even though the brain is small in size compared to the rest of the body, it requires a disproportionately large share of blood supply to function properly. When circulation becomes less efficient with age, brain cells receive less oxygen and less glucose, and this directly affects clarity, speed of thinking, and memory stability. On top of all this, there is a chemical system inside the brain that depends heavily on nutrition, particularly a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which plays a central role in forming and retrieving memories. The body builds acetylcholine from a nutrient called choline, and without enough of it, memory function becomes noticeably weaker. This is where eggs become especially important, because one of the richest natural sources of choline exists in a part of the egg that many people discard without realizing its value. This brings us to a patient I worked with, a woman I'll call Margaret. She was 68 when she first came in, and she described something that many people find frightening: a gradual but noticeable change in her memory and mental clarity. She had once been the person in her family who remembered everything: birthdays, appointments, details of conversations, small things that others forgot. But over the past couple of years, that identity had started to slip. She struggled to find words mid-sentence. She would forget names she had known for decades, and she often reread the same paragraph multiple times because it wouldn't stay in her mind. She also described a strange kind of mental fatigue, waking up already feeling like her brain had not fully recovered from the day before. When we talked about her morning routine, she explained her breakfast very clearly. It was something she believed was healthy and responsible: egg whites scrambled in a pan, served with white toast and a glass of orange juice. On the surface, this looks like a clean breakfast, and many people still believe it supports heart and brain health. But when we examined it more closely, a very different picture emerged. By removing the yolk, she was removing most of the brain-supportive nutrients in the egg. By relying only on egg whites, she was missing the choline needed for acetylcholine production, as well as key vitamins and protective compounds. The toast was rapidly increasing her blood sugar, followed by a crash that left her brain underfueled mid-morning. And the orange juice, despite its healthy image, was adding a concentrated sugar load without the fiber that normally slows absorption. Together, these choices created a pattern that was not supporting her brain, but stressing it every single morning. That realization became the starting point for change, and from there, we began rebuilding her breakfast step by step. We started by changing the foundation, rather than trying to fix everything at once, because the brain responds best to steady, consistent improvements rather than sudden extremes. Margaret didn't need a complicated diet plan or unfamiliar ingredients. She needed her breakfast to stop working against her. Over the following weeks, the goal was simple: restore missing nutrients, stabilize her morning blood sugar, and reduce the inflammatory load that had been building every day without her realizing it. What surprised her most was not how complex the solution was, but how ordinary it actually looked once it was corrected. The first change was replacing egg whites with whole eggs. This alone shifted the nutritional profile of her breakfast in a meaningful way. The yolk, which she had previously discarded without hesitation, contains the majority of the egg's brain-relevant nutrients, especially choline, which is essential for producing acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter closely tied to memory formation and recall. It also contains vitamin B12, which supports nerve integrity, and carotenoids like lutein and zeaxanthin, which accumulate in brain tissue and help defend neurons from oxidative damage. When these nutrients were restored, her breakfast was no longer just a source of protein, it became a source of neurological support. The egg whites still played a role, but they were no longer carrying the entire burden of nutrition, while the most valuable part was being thrown away. The second adjustment was how the eggs were cooked. Previously, she had been cooking them on high heat until they were firm, slightly browned, and sometimes rubbery in texture. While this might seem like a harmless preference, high heat cooking changes the chemical structure of food in ways that matter for long-term health. It increases the formation of advanced glycation end products, compounds associated with inflammation and cellular stress. It also reduces the bioavailability of certain proteins, meaning the body has a harder time using them efficiently. By shifting to a gentler method, soft scrambling over low to medium heat, or light poaching, the nutritional integrity of the eggs was better preserved. The result was not only easier digestion, but a cleaner nutrient profile for the brain to work with. The third change addressed what the eggs were being paired with. Her original combination of white toast and orange juice created a rapid spike in blood sugar, followed by an inevitable crash. That cycle is particularly disruptive for the brain, which relies heavily on a steady glucose supply. When blood sugar rises quickly, insulin rises quickly as well, and what follows is often a drop that leaves the brain underfueled. That underfueled state is what many people describe as brain fog, difficulty concentrating, irritability, or a feeling of mental heaviness. By removing those high glycemic foods and replacing them with slower, more stable sources of energy, her mornings began to feel less erratic. Instead of a spike and crash pattern, her energy became more even and predictable. The fourth adjustment was adding nutritional support rather than just removing harmful elements. This is where foods like spinach, avocado, and walnuts entered the picture. Spinach provided folate and additional carotenoids that work alongside those found in egg yolk, reinforcing protective effects in the brain. Avocado added monounsaturated fats that support cell membrane flexibility, which is essential for efficient neural communication. Walnuts contributed plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, which are associated with brain structure and cognitive resilience. These additions didn't just fill gaps, they actively worked with the eggs to create a more complete neurological support system in the same meal. The fifth and final change involved timing. Margaret had often delayed breakfast or eaten it inconsistently, sometimes hours after waking. This disrupted the natural rhythm of her metabolism and cognitive energy. Once she began eating a structured breakfast within a reasonable time after waking, her body was better able to align cortisol rhythms, stabilize energy, and supply the brain with nutrients at the moment it was most receptive. Over time, she began noticing subtle but important shifts. Her mornings felt less mentally heavy, her recall improved slightly, and the constant sense of cognitive fatigue began to ease. What became clear through Margaret's experience is that the issue was never one single food, but the combination of small daily choices repeated over years. Breakfast, something most people treat as routine and automatic, had quietly become a driver of her symptoms, and once those patterns were corrected, her brain finally had a chance to function under more supportive conditions rather than constant strain. Now, to understand how this applies more broadly, we need to look at the most common mistakes people over 60 make, with eggs specifically, because even a nutritious food can lose much of its value depending on how it is handled. The first major mistake is discarding the yolk. This is more significant than most people realize, because it removes the most nutrient-dense part of the egg, specifically tied to brain health. While egg whites provide high-quality protein, they contain very little of the compounds the brain depends on for memory and cognitive stability. The yolk is where choline is concentrated, and choline is the raw material the body uses to produce acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter essential for learning and recall. Without enough of it, the brain's ability to form and retrieve memories becomes less efficient over time. The yolk also contains vitamin B12, which supports the protective coating around nerves, and fat-soluble antioxidants, like lutein and zeaxanthin, which accumulate in brain tissue and help defend it from oxidative stress. When the yolk is removed, the egg is no longer a complete brain-supporting food. It becomes a partial version of its original nutritional design. Many people avoided yolks for years due to outdated concerns about cholesterol, but modern research shows the relationship between dietary cholesterol and cognitive health is far more complex than previously thought. In most cases, for brain health, removing the yolk does more harm than good in terms of nutrient loss. The second mistake involves how eggs are cooked. High-heat cooking, until eggs are browned, rubbery, or overly firm, may seem like a matter of taste, but it has biochemical consequences. Excessive heat promotes the formation of compounds known as advanced glycation end products, which are associated with increased inflammation in the body, including neural tissue. It can also degrade the quality of certain proteins, making them less efficient for digestion and absorption. The brain benefits more from eggs that are cooked gently, where the structure of the nutrients remains largely intact. Soft scrambling over low to medium heat, poaching, or lightly boiling preserves more of the egg's natural nutritional profile. The difference is not just culinary, it is physiological, because the brain ultimately responds to what nutrients are available in usable form, not just what is present in theory. The third mistake is combining eggs with foods that cause rapid blood sugar spikes. This includes white bread, pastries, sweetened cereals, and fruit juices. When these are eaten alongside eggs, they trigger a sharp rise in blood glucose, followed by a strong insulin response. This is often followed by a rapid drop in blood sugar, leaving the brain temporarily underfueled. Because the brain relies heavily on glucose for energy, this fluctuation can lead to symptoms such as mental fatigue, reduced concentration, irritability, and what many people describe as brain fog. Over time, repeated cycles of spikes and crashes place stress on metabolic regulation and may interfere with the brain's ability to maintain steady energy use. Even though eggs themselves are stable and beneficial, pairing them with high glycemic foods can significantly reduce their overall positive impact. The fourth mistake is failing to pair eggs with foods that enhance their benefits. Eggs provide a strong nutritional base, but they work best when combined with complementary foods that support brain health from different angles. Without these additions, the meal is incomplete in terms of anti-inflammatory support and micronutrient diversity. Foods such as leafy greens, healthy fats, and antioxidant-rich fruits help create a more balanced biochemical environment for the brain. For example, leafy greens provide folate and additional carotenoids, healthy fats support neuron membrane function, and certain fruits contribute compounds that reduce oxidative stress. When eggs are eaten alone, or with nutritionally empty sides, the opportunity to amplify their benefits is largely missed. The brain does not respond to single foods in isolation. It responds to patterns of nutrition, and the combination matters as much as the ingredients themselves. The fifth mistake is poor timing, either skipping breakfast entirely or delaying it for several hours after waking. The body follows a natural hormonal rhythm in the morning, including a rise in cortisol that supports alertness and energy regulation. When a protein-rich breakfast is consumed within a reasonable window after waking, it helps stabilize blood sugar and provides amino acids needed for neurotransmitter production. This supports dopamine and serotonin balance, both of which play roles in motivation, mood, and cognitive clarity. When breakfast is delayed or skipped, the brain may operate for hours without adequate nutritional support, which can contribute to reduced focus and mid-morning energy dips. Over time, this pattern can become more noticeable, especially in older adults whose neurotransmitter production is naturally less robust than in earlier decades. Together, these 5 mistakes show a consistent pattern. The issue is not eggs themselves, but how they are prepared, what they are combined with, and when they are consumed. Once these factors are corrected, eggs shift from being a neutral food to one of the most efficient brain-supporting foods available in a daily routine. And when paired properly, they become part of a broader breakfast strategy that supports memory, focus, and long-term cognitive resilience. Now that we understand the common mistakes, the next step is to look at what a properly structured brain-supporting breakfast actually looks like in practice, and how small additions can significantly change its impact on mental clarity and energy. The first food that deserves a place beside your eggs is avocado. Many people still think of avocado as a modern health trend, but from a nutritional perspective, it functions almost like targeted support for the brain. Avocados are rich in monounsaturated fats, the same category of healthy fats found in extra virgin olive oil. These fats play an important role in maintaining the flexibility and integrity of neural membranes. Every thought, every memory, and every signal moving through the brain depends on healthy communication between neurons, and that communication is influenced by the quality of the membranes surrounding those cells. Avocados also provide folate, which supports processes involved in protecting DNA and maintaining healthy brain function, along with potassium, a mineral that contributes to blood pressure regulation and healthy circulation. Since proper blood flow is essential for delivering oxygen and nutrients to the brain, maintaining vascular health indirectly supports memory and cognitive performance as well. They also contain vitamin E, a powerful antioxidant that helps defend neural tissue from oxidative damage. Adding half an avocado to breakfast may seem like a simple choice, but nutritionally, it provides exactly the kind of support an aging brain benefits from. The second food is spinach, one of the most nutrient-dense leafy greens available. Whether eaten raw or lightly cooked, spinach delivers a remarkable combination of compounds that support cognitive health. It contains folate, which helps regulate homocysteine, an amino acid that has been linked to accelerated brain aging when levels remain elevated. It also contains lutein and zeaxanthin, the same protective carotenoids found in egg yolks. When these nutrients are consumed together, their effects are amplified, increasing the body's supply of compounds that accumulate in brain tissue and help defend neurons from oxidative stress. Research has repeatedly shown that people with higher levels of these carotenoids often perform better on tests involving memory, processing speed, and overall cognitive function. Spinach also provides magnesium, a mineral involved in hundreds of biochemical reactions, including many that support energy production inside the brain's cells. Simply adding a handful of spinach to scrambled eggs, or serving it on the side, requires very little effort, yet it dramatically improves the nutritional value of the meal. The third food is blueberries, a fruit that has received enormous attention from researchers studying brain aging. Despite their small size, blueberries are packed with compounds called anthocyanins, which give them their deep blue color. These compounds are especially interesting because they can cross the blood-brain barrier and directly influence brain tissue. Once there, they appear to support neuroplasticity, improve blood flow to areas of the brain involved in memory, and reduce inflammation that contributes to cognitive decline. Studies involving older adults have shown that regular consumption of blueberries is associated with improvements in memory, learning, and certain aspects of executive function. Another advantage is that blueberries contain less sugar than many other fruits, making them a more stable choice for maintaining healthy blood glucose levels. A small serving beside your eggs is not simply decorative, it provides compounds that actively support the health and performance of the brain. The fourth food is walnuts, and it is almost fitting that they resemble tiny brains because nutritionally, they offer impressive support for cognitive health. Walnuts contain alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid that the body can partially convert into forms used by the brain. They also provide polyphenols that help reduce inflammation and support the growth of beneficial gut bacteria. This matters because scientists now understand that the relationship between the gut and the brain is much more significant than once believed. The gut microbiome influences the production of various compounds that affect mood, inflammation, and cognitive function. A healthier gut environment can contribute to a healthier brain environment as well. Research has shown that even modest daily consumption of walnuts is associated with improvements in verbal memory and information processing in older adults. Adding a small handful of walnuts to breakfast creates another layer of support for cognitive health. The fifth food is extra virgin olive oil, one of the most extensively studied foods in relation to healthy aging and brain function. It contains a compound called oleocanthal, which possesses natural anti-inflammatory properties. Chronic inflammation is increasingly recognized as a major factor in cognitive decline, making foods that reduce inflammatory processes particularly valuable. Extra virgin olive oil also contains monounsaturated fats and a wide range of polyphenols that help protect cells from damage. However, one important detail often gets overlooked. High heat can damage many of these beneficial compounds. Instead of using it for intense frying, it is best used gently, either for lightly cooking vegetables or drizzling over food after preparation. Even a small amount can provide meaningful support for brain health when used consistently. All of these foods work together in ways that are greater than the sum of their individual benefits. Eggs provide choline, protein, and essential nutrients. Avocados provide healthy fats and antioxidants. Spinach contributes folate and carotenoids. Blueberries deliver powerful plant compounds that directly support brain tissue. Walnuts strengthen the meal with omega-3s and gut-brain support, while extra virgin olive oil adds anti-inflammatory protection. Together, they create a breakfast that supports blood flow, reduces inflammation, stabilizes energy, and supplies the raw materials the brain needs to maintain memory and mental clarity. There is another piece of this puzzle that many people overlook entirely, and it has to do with timing and the body's natural rhythms. The brain is not only influenced by what you eat, but also by when you eat it. Understanding that connection can completely change how you think about your morning routine, and why some people feel mentally sharp while others struggle with fatigue and fog before noon. When you wake up in the morning, your body is already going through a carefully designed biological process. One of the most important parts of that process is the natural rise in cortisol, often called the cortisol awakening response. Although cortisol is sometimes spoken about negatively, it actually plays an essential role in helping you become alert, mobilize energy, and prepare both your body and your brain for the demands of the day. This early morning window creates an opportunity that many people miss. When you eat a protein-rich, nutrient-dense breakfast, within roughly 30 to 60 minutes of waking, you work with your body's natural rhythm instead of against it. The amino acids from foods like eggs become the building blocks for neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin, chemicals involved in motivation, mood, focus, and emotional stability. At the same time, healthy fats and steady sources of nutrition help stabilize blood sugar, preventing the spikes and crashes that leave so many people feeling mentally drained before the afternoon even begins. People who routinely skip breakfast or delay eating until late morning often notice something interesting without always understanding the cause. They may feel less focused, more irritable, or mentally sluggish during the first half of the day. For older adults, this matters even more because the body's ability to produce and regulate neurotransmitters is not as efficient as it was decades earlier. Missing this daily opportunity repeatedly over many years can gradually contribute to poorer cognitive performance and a greater sense of mental fatigue. It doesn't mean breakfast alone determines brain health, but it does mean that consistently providing the brain with high-quality nutrition early in the day can make a meaningful difference. I was reminded of this by another patient, a man I'll call Raymond. He was 71 years old and had spent most of his life working as an engineer, a profession that demanded concentration, problem-solving, and precision. He wasn't frightened by the changes he was experiencing, but he was deeply frustrated by them. He told me that tasks, which once felt easy, now required much more effort. Words occasionally escaped him. He would pause during conversations, searching for details that had once come instantly to mind. Gradually, he became less confident socially because he worried about those moments of hesitation. His wife had noticed the changes too, and although she rarely said much about it, he could tell she was concerned. Raymond's breakfast habits were surprisingly common. Most mornings began with a strong cup of coffee, loaded with flavored creamer, and a large glass of grapefruit juice. Sometimes he added a granola bar, but often he ate very little and waited several hours before having anything substantial. He had avoided eggs for years because he still believed they were harmful to heart health. Another issue quickly became obvious during our conversations. He wasn't drinking enough water. Like many people, he never connected mild dehydration with his mental fog and slower thinking. Over the next 6 weeks, we made several straightforward changes. He began his mornings with a large glass of water before reaching for coffee. He introduced a complete breakfast consisting of whole eggs, spinach, avocado, walnuts, and blueberries, and he ate it within about 45 minutes of waking. He removed the sugary creamer and stopped drinking fruit juice with breakfast. Nothing about the plan was extreme or complicated. It simply provided his brain with the nutrients and stability it had been missing. The changes he described over the following months were not dramatic in a movie-like sense. They were subtle, steady, and deeply meaningful. He said his thoughts no longer felt so heavy. Finding words became easier. Conversations felt less stressful. His confidence gradually returned. Then one day, he shared something that stayed with me. He had started playing online chess with his grandson again. He had stopped playing because he felt too slow and too mentally tired to enjoy it. But now he was participating again, and even winning some matches. What mattered wasn't the victories themselves. It was the feeling of competence returning, the sense that he had regained something important about himself. That experience captures an essential truth about nutrition and the aging brain. Good nutrition does not stop time, and it does not guarantee that memory will never change. But it can provide the brain with the materials it needs to function better and to protect itself more effectively as the years pass. There are also several additional breakfast habits that deserve attention because they quietly undermine brain health in many older adults. The first is consuming sweetened coffee drinks. A flavored latte or coffee loaded with syrups can contain astonishing amounts of sugar, often enough to create a significant blood sugar spike before the day has properly begun. The second is relying on fruit juice. Although fruit itself can be nutritious, most juices remove the fiber that normally slows sugar absorption, turning what appears to be a healthy drink into a concentrated source of rapidly absorbed sugar. The third issue is eating processed meats, such as bacon, sausage, and certain deli meats on a regular basis. These foods are often high in sodium and compounds associated with vascular stress, and healthy blood vessels are essential because the brain depends heavily on a strong blood supply. The fourth mistake is ignoring hydration. The brain is composed largely of water, and even mild dehydration can measurably affect concentration, mood, and short-term memory. After 7 or 8 hours of sleep, many people wake up already slightly dehydrated. Drinking a large glass of water before breakfast is one of the simplest and most effective habits for supporting mental performance. The fifth mistake is skipping protein entirely. A breakfast made up only of toast, fruit, or a small serving of yogurt often fails to provide enough protein to support neurotransmitter production and maintain steady energy. Protein is one of the fundamental building blocks the brain relies on every morning. So what might an ideal brain-supportive breakfast actually look like? It can be remarkably simple. You wake up and begin with a large glass of water, somewhere around 12 to 16 ounces. Then you prepare 2 whole eggs, cook gently over low to medium heat, perhaps softly scrambled with a little extra virgin olive oil or lightly poached. Alongside them, you add a generous handful of spinach, lightly wilted with a small drizzle of olive oil. You slice half an avocado and place a small serving of blueberries and walnuts on the side. You enjoy the meal slowly, giving your body and your brain the opportunity to absorb and use those nutrients effectively. The preparation requires less than 15 minutes, but the benefits build over time. Each breakfast becomes a small investment in the future of your brain, and this leads to perhaps the most important message of all. Growing older does not automatically mean losing yourself. The brain is not simply a machine that wears out and stops improving. Research on neuroplasticity shows that the brain retains an extraordinary ability to adapt, strengthen connections,